Hey guys, how are we doing? Welcome to Craftsman's Guide. Today we're going to be building battle boards. These modular pieces of terrain are probably the easiest and most simple, most versatile pieces that I've ever made. I've got this rocky one here, in this sort of foresty, crossroady sort of thing. I want to make a more basic field one and a sort of stony, cliffy sort of basic board. You can throw any piece of modular terrain on there and make some amazing battle maps that fit into almost any situation. You need some really basic stuff, which I'm going to show you. Let's go! Alright, let's get into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is measure out 60 by 44 centimeters. I use 2/3 of one of these battle grids. The size doesn't particularly matter, but I chose this one for storage purposes. Then, grab yourself a knife and begin making drawing cuts. Once you get about 2/3 of the way through, just grab the board, push on the opposite side, and it'll just snap. Then, the next thing you're going to do is grab yourself a fine sanding block. This scratches up the surface and gives paint something to hold on to. The factory surfaces don't really like attaching to things. Once you've done that, grab yourself a texture and begin marking out where you think that some sort of grass, rocks, difficult terrain sort of thing would look. I just started making these little cloud shapes everywhere. Then, grab yourself a big bottle PVA and just begin to lather the entire board with it. You'll also want to grab yourself an old brush, one you don't really care about losing. I use my girlfriend's old makeup brush because it has really good surface area, and just begin spreading it across the entire board. And yes, those gross slapping noises are 100% necessary. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. Alright, and then go and raid some kid's sandpit or something like that to get yourself some rocky sort of fine sand. If you don't have access to a sandpit, you can get it from any decor store. Then, you want to make some rocks. There's two ways you can go about this. Here, I'm showing myself carving some rocks out of foam. This is one option. Otherwise, the thing that I usually use most is decor rocks from Kmart or similar hardware store that I've just smashed up with a hammer. Start placing them around. It doesn't matter which technique you use, but it's best to get a variation of big and small stones and group them into small little areas. Putting them together like this gives this sort of illusion of like a cracked big boulder or something similar, where the grass begins to grow over. Once you're done, and you think it looks pretty good, just grab a handful of sand and heavily pour it over that area. This will give a nice texture later on, you'll see. Alright, so now it's been 23 years and the PVA is finally dry. Make sure you sort of tilt it out and pour off all the excess. Then, grab yourself some trusty Mod Podge that has some paint mixed in. It doesn't matter what color you use, I just had some brown lying around, so I painted all of the stone areas with it. Then, go in again with a black Mod Podge, or continue with the same color and paint over the rest of the surface. This takes a fairly long time, but the end result should look a little something like this. This will essentially lock the sand in and give it a much tougher surface. Alright, so once you're done, grab yourself a handful of different paints. These are essentially all you need. If you wanted to leave it here, you could just paint over grey and then make a stony sort of texture over the entire board to get that rocky surface. But we're going for grass. So here I've just started painting the rock specifically. Start with a dark grey base coat and sort of just dry brush, covering the most of the surface of the stones. Once you're done, grab these three colours and mix yourself a tanny sort of colour. It should be yellow. Make sure you get most of the paint off your brush so it's really dry. You just want to hit the tips of the rocks with this colour. That looks pretty good. So, then just gently do the same thing and just hit the top surfaces of each of the rock. Once you've done that, grab yourself a lighter grey, really light. and just gently brush the tops. You just want to hit the highest points to give it a nice highlighting. And don't forget to do the little rocks in the middle. Once done, it should look a little something like this. Oh yeah, those are some good looking rocks. Alright, the next step is making a grassy sort of green texture. Grab yourself a dark green and just begin doing the same technique over all the browny areas. Give it a really nice coat. Then, grab yourself a lighter green and go over the rest of the area with it. This essentially makes the undertones or the underbrush for once you put the flocking on. Alright, once you're done, it should be mostly covered. It's not too specific. And then here comes the fun part. Grab your PVA again and just begin covering the entire surface around the rocks. This is what your really rough flocking area is going to look like, so make sure you just do those areas. The more PVA, the better. The more area for the flocking to grip onto, the better. Once you're done, grab yourself some coarse turf. If you don't have access to woodland scenic sort of flocking, then you can make yourself from home. There's a million videos on YouTube. I'll put a couple here. And just begin covering the entire area that you've just PVA'd. The more the merrier with this, the more that sticks the better. Pat it down with your hand so that it actually sticks to the board. I cannot stress this enough, you don't want it all falling off because it makes a mess. Once again, grab yourself that big bottle of PVA and just begin covering the rest of the surface. Now this is going to be a very messy process, but it's worth it in the end. Then, grab yourself a nice big brush and just to begin to entirely coat it. Don't be afraid to pick up some of this flocking and mix it with the glue. It'll make these sort of like grass bowls that'll just spread all over the PVA and make some really nice texture. If you don't think you have enough PVA, put more on. There's never too much PVA. Once you've done it, it should look a little something like this. Then, grab yourself a really fine turf or a really darker color. The different changes in colors makes a very natural, nice look, and just begin very liberally covering the entire surface. Make sure that you mix it in with that coarse turf as well, so that it gets a nice little contrast between. When you're done, grab a clean brush and begin brushing off the rocks a little bit. You still want to leave some moss on there because it looks really nice. Then, grab yourself some flocking, these large bushy areas. You could leave it like this, but I like this sort of like bushland look. And then grab your PVA and just begin to dab and place these bushes wherever you like. You can make this sort of stuff by just getting some twine and unraveling it, mixing with some paint and mushing it until it looks foresty. "10 years later, when the PVA is finally dried, go around with a paper towel and just dab at the grass to push it in and get rid of the weird lumps that have formed. Alright, once it's finished, it should look like this nice sort of rocky grass area. Let's take a look at it in action. Alright, that concludes my first video. Thank you guys so much for making it this far. If you want to see more, please subscribe and leave a comment down below of what you want to see more of in the future. I'll see you in the next adventure.